Um, Let me ask something that I read about you that I didn't know until I read this
What's up?
about you, that you dual citizen,
Yeah.
Polish citizenship.
Yeah.
So I'm obsessed with Poland right now because I feel like they're on the front lines of trying to save NATO and
Yeah.
trying to preserve this bulwark against Russian aggression. How much family do you have? How nervous are they? The Poles that I know are like not only nervous, but man, they're ready to pick up arms and say, "Let's go."
Yeah.
What's your experience?
Okay. So my mom was born in Poland. She became an American in 2001 or 2002 to vote for George
Hmm.
Bush.
Hmm.
Talk about like last one in.
But by the
Um,
way, you know that I mean, literally, I'll never forget this. They were the the two most supportive countries to the United States and Iraq were the UK and Poland.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's a strategic reason for it. I mean, where
Hmm.
they are placed in the map in Europe, they've always been invaded. They've always been toppled, whether it's Germany or Russia.
Hmm.
There's always been a conclave. Where my family is from is actually Lviv now, but it was called Lvov when it was Poland. They
Hmm.
moved obviously west towards Poland when my mom was born. My grandmother was in a camp in Hamburg as a child, so she was used as like a test baby, like they used bear drugs and stuff, and they tested them out on them in these war camps.
Wow.
So she speaks Polish, my mom speaks Polish, and people would think, oh, you're Italian, Tara Palmeri. My dad is Italian American, but our family goes back to like 1885. They just all are a
Mm,
bunch of Italians that lived in Hoboken forever. So it's really my mom's side I feel closest to. I've always
hmm.
heard war stories in the house.
Yeah.
My Nazis obviously invaded, conscripted my grandfather into Nazi youth.
Hmm.
My grandfather was also locked up by the commies for 5 years. So it was also like there's so much intensity and anxiety, and it's kind of like I'm not Jewish, but like I understand the Jewish anxiety as well
Hmm.
because it's in the DNA of our people. Like it just comes down from like
Poland has
years
been,
and years
as
of
you just
being
pointed out, they've been abused either on the east by the Germans or on the or the east by the Russians or the west by the Germans.
Exactly. They're just like an anxious people in general.
Yeah.
And my grandmother like cries and watches the war in Ukraine, my babcia.
Mm,
And so, I think, but at the same time, like we're a family that's split. Like half of them are super Trumpy,
right.
and the other half, and the Polish half, most of them are Trumpy except for my babcia and my mom. And the rest of the
Hmm.
Poles are Trumpy. And then my dad's very Trumpy as well. He's like MAGA before MAGA was a thing.
Right.
Hannity and Combs, Rush Limbaugh. He turned off Fox when they called the election for Biden and never turned it on again, which is how he found YouTube. Um, but the point is that like, I come from a mixed family, and my
Yeah.
mom votes for Trump, then Biden,
Hmm.
and then Kamala. Like it's kind of random. So they vote with their pocketbooks. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. I'm first generation American. So like there's a lot of different like plays in there, but I think for them, like just being Polish, they're very much aware of that border and what
Yeah.
that means.
You know,
They're
one
not
thing
like
I
sitting, we
learned.
don't sit around and talk about NATO though. I'll be
No, and I
honest.
understand that, but I
It's
have a
very
friend of
like
mine who's
yeah,
I have a friend of mine, an older friend of mine who's Polish, and he's been flying the Ukrainian flag, and
mm,
and he explained to me, he goes, "This is actually a little uncomfortable for me at first." And I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Because us Poles usually hate the Ukrainians. Like there's this like
yes.
rivalry, there's this like inherent rivalry, and it's just sort of like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah." But the enemy of my enemy is my brother. Forget friend, right? And
exactly.
the thing they have in common is the evil Russians, right? And
Yes.
it is really have I didn't know this. Tell me a little is there anything reasoning why Poles and Ukrainians had sort of this historical rivalry?
Okay. Well, first of all, my grandmother always goes to me, Tara, listen to me. Trump does not understand Putin. And she's like, she's just thinks that Trump is getting played like every day. She says that.
She's not alone in that
She,
one. There's a lot of
yeah,
people who think that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Although she was actually really turned off by MSNBC because she followed the Mueller investigation and with the
Yeah.
Russian collusion. And when there was no result, she stopped watching it.
Yeah.
She was a huge fan of Rachel Maddow and just stopped altogether.
Well, every
Yeah, it's a
day
weird.
the big stuff is coming. The big stuff is coming. I mean,
Yeah,
when you overpromise and underdeliver, and you know,
that's the
you're
trust.
going to break trust. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what the community is based on. Exactly.
Hmm.
So, It's hard to say. Yeah, like I said, our family is from Lviv, which was conquered by many people, Austrians,
Hmm.
Germans, Russians. It was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. My grandmother
Hmm.
speaks Ukrainian, Russian, Polish. You have to speak all the languages.
In order to survive,
And
really, right?
yeah, the borders have constantly changed, and because of the changes,
Yeah.
like yeah, you have enemies. But for the most part, like I don't think my family thinks that way because again, like my grandmother left like before the war. I mean, before the
Hmm.
wall fell. And she's just like, she obviously is constantly on phone calls to Poland. She watches TV Polonia all day long, but
Mm.
they're definitely more of like allies of Ukraine. And like Ukraine was Russia for a long time. Like we were
Right.
all Soviet Union. Um, yeah, there are a lot of people who are like the Ukrainian state wasn't a state until 1991, and they'll say things like that. But um, those are I'm actually more concerned about my brother's generation. My brother is 27, 28. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't understand why people fear Russia. And that's because he listens to like Tucker Carlson every day, and that's his
Yeah.
main news source, and Ben Shapiro. Like those are his top news sources. I was like, talk to Bobchi. Like she'll explain to you why people fear
Right.
Russia. And that's the problem. This young generation
For
doesn't
me, I don't know
know.
why the trail of dead opposition leaders to Putin isn't enough to convince you this isn't a good place, right? I do believe this is a weak country, but it's a weak country with nuclear weapons, or as John McCain called it, it's a gas station with nuclear weapons, right? It's sort of,
Right.
but it
Right.
is, and you have to pay some respect, but it is not. It is it is not a this is not a democratic society. This is not a free society, and you can feel the fear, you hear the fear. It is real. Let me ask you this: would you travel to Moscow right now?
No, I would be
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
terrified. Would you?
I think no, because I think we would be targets.
And I
Be
don't
easy
think
to
that,
target
and they
us.
know that the Trump administration wouldn't bail us out.
Not a
Definitely
journalist.
not.
No,
I mean,
it's
maybe,
the most unmooring thing has been this issue with Russia for me. Like, wait a minute, what? Which side are we suddenly on? Number one, and then
mm,
number two, this feeling of, does the president believe he's the president for all Americans or just the people that support him? And
mm,
I think is will he fight hard to get any U.S. citizen out of custody or only ones that voted for him?
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good question. Um,
I hope it's not
I
tested. Obviously, none of us want to see anybody kidnapped,
if
but
you wanted to get out of prison, you'd have to start putting out really pro Trump, voices and
mhm,
material and stuff like that. You have to just like appeal to his flattery. Like it is actually easy to get him on your side, but if, as a journalist, like you don't do
it's
that.
uncomfortable, right? You just
Yeah,
don't
you would
you don't you
never
don't
do
get rid of your
it.
principles that way. Look, if I'm Rod Blagojevich, fine, but I'm not Rob.
Yeah.
I don't have the moral code of Rod Blagojevich, and I'll just leave it at that.